the Tower of the Babel. All humanity once spoke in a single language until they certainly split into many groups, unable to understand each other. Okay. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with the story of the, the Tower of the Babel. These comes from the Bible. Okay. The Old Testament. The Bible is comprised of the two different books, Old Testament and New Testament. Old Testament is about the prophecy of Jesus Christ, the Savior, and then New Testament is about Jesus Christ after his birth. So all humanity, meaning all humans, once spoke a single language until they suddenly split into they were divided into many different groups. Many different groups means those many different groups spoke their own languages. What happened? So they were unable to understand each other. This part is exactly in the Bible. Okay. And we don't know if such an original language ever exists. Here, if means 인지 아닌지. Okay. So we do not know such an original language. What is original language? This is archetype language. Separate but archetype. When you see this, we just call it a prefix. Call it prefix means 접두어, and it means something very old. When something is very old, you can just say this archetype. You know the archaeology. What is the study? What is the study? The archaeology. Archaeology. Yeah, that's right. The study of the old artifacts, old architecture, old structures. Okay, study of artifact. What is an artifact? Artifacts. Separate artifacts means the things that were made by human beings. That's artifacts. That's study about the archaeology. So there might have been an archetype language, like a number one language, the very first language. Okay, we don't know if there were original language was ever there, but we do know, we actually know, we surely know that the thousands of languages existing today can be traced back to the of much smaller language. That means how many languages do we have? More than thousands, like 2,000, 3,000. But we are pretty sure there could, there could have been like a very few languages that's before those three languages split into the thousands and hundreds and thousand languages later. Okay. Okay. So we can trace back to the very first languages. Okay. And much smaller number. And so how did we end up with so many? Can anyone tell me what it means, end up? End up ing. End up. Meaning 결국 땡땡하게 되다. That means how come we got so many different languages, so many varied kinds of languages? That is the very reason that we have communicative problems. We don't know much about Chinese. We don't know much about Japanese. In the early days of the human migration, what is a migration? Meaning 이동. Okay? The migrations, the word was much less populated. There were not many people. It's like now, how many? Globally, how many? Like 7 billion? Probably, right? 7 billion. 70억? And groups of people that shared a single language and single culture often split into smaller tribes. 부족. Okay? Or one tribe, one language one language group. Okay, they shared one single culture, and they split into different groups, different tribes, 부족. They and going separate ways in search of fresh game. What is a game? 사냥감. That's a game, not the game you play all the time. And fertile land. What is a fertile land? Fertile means it's like rich soil, or the soil that is rich in minerals. That means 비옥한 토양. That's a barren land. And fertile land. Sorry, barren land is totally opposite to it. The fertile land. So those tribes that must have shared single language, they split into different groups, and those different groups were also in search of fresh game, fresh hunting objects, animals, and then the fruits. And as they migrate and settle in new places, they became isolated. So what does that mean, isolated? Isolate means 고립시키다. So they were 고립되다. They were isolated. Okay, they were isolated from each other. That means the very first tribe and their group, they had a single language. They split through three groups, and they're also split this way. Exponentially, they split into small groups. Okay? And then they live in Asia, and they started living in Africa. They started living in Europe. They started living in Australia. They started living in North America. Yeah? You understand? So those groups were separated from each other. They were isolated from each other. There were no chance for them to, confront each other. 만날 기회 없었어. Okay? Then naturally, what must have happened to them? They developed it in different ways of communication. So centuries were living in different conditions. Like some were living in far north, some are living in the far south, some are living in the far east and west. They had no chances to meet each other. They lived in isolated areas. Okay, they were eating their own local food. Okay, they were encountered 직면하다, 마주하다, different neighbors. Okay, and then what happened? Turned similar dialects. What is that dialect? 방언. Okay, 사투리. With the varied pronunciation and vocabulary into radically different languages. Radically different languages. For instance, do you guys have ability to understand what the people in Jeju Island, their native Jeju Island residents say? Do you understand what they say? I don't. Do you? Maybe you don't. Because the Jeju dialect is hard to understand. To continue to divide as the population grew and spread the further. So, their moving, their migration, their separation, and their languages, their dialects, ever changed. Never, non-stop. Like genealogists, 족보학 is genealogy. 족보 is genealogy. Right? What is a gene? 유전자. ology, 학문. That is a 유전학 or 족보학. Modern linguist, 언어학자, try to map this process, like 어떤 과정으로 이어졌는지 지도를 그려볼래서. By tracing multiple languages back as far as they can to their common ancestor. They were in great pursuit to look into whether there was a common their ancestor who spoke the prototype language. What is a prototype language? 원형 언어. 원형 언어. Proto. 원형 언어. And a group of all languages related in this way is called a language family. Anybody knows which language group or family does Korean belongs to? 우랄, 알타이. We belong to 우랄, 알타이어죠. A group of all languages related in this way is called the language family, which can contain many branches of subfamilies. Okay?